अस्सलाम वालेकुम फ्रेंड्स, कैसे आप सब लोग? आई होप आप सब लोग बिल्कुल ठीक होंगे। वेलकम टू एवोल्यूशन बाय टेस्ट। इस वीडियो से हम लोग अपने बाकी के टॉपिक्स को कंप्लीट करेंगे। ठीक है, BT101 के हमारे जो टॉपिक्स रह गए हैं उनको कंप्लीट कर लेते हैं। हमारे 73 तक हमने कर लिया और 74 से स्टार्ट करना होगा। ठीक है, तो कोशिश मेरी है कि 80 तक इस वीडियो में मैं कर दूँ टॉपिक्स। सो चलते हैं हम आगे। Group of organisms belonging to same dash living at same space and at particular time is known as population and discussion. Community comprises of individuals belonging to different species. Heat is radiated into space in the form of नेक्स्ट लेते हैं हमारा मेन टॉपिक है प्रोटेक्शन ऑफ एंडेंजर्ड स्पीशीज।
अभी आपने बहुत सी टाइप्स की पोल्यूशन स्टडी की, हमने वेस्ट वाटर से कॉज होने वाला वाटर पोल्यूशन जो है उसके इम्पैक्ट को स्टडी किया। उससे पहले वी हैव स्टडीड सर्टेन अदर फिनोमेनन फॉर एग्जांपल हैबिटेट डिफ्रेगमेंटेशन, एसिड रेन्स, बायोमैग्निफिकेशन, ग्लोबल वार्मिंग। सो देयर आर सेवरल डिफरेंट फिनोमेनन व्हिच आर कॉज्ड बाय द ह्यूमन एक्टिविटीज, और इन सारी एक्टिविटीज़ के जो नेगेटिव इम्पैक्ट्स हैं दे आर डायरेक्टली ऑन आवर इकोसिस्टम। और हमारे इकोसिस्टम में मौजूद सारी स्पीशीज़ अपनी टॉलरेंस रेंज के अकॉर्डिंग इन सारे फैक्टर से और इन सारे फिनोमेनन से डायरेक्टली और इनडायरेक्टली अफेक्ट होते हैं। So उसका रिजल्ट जो है वो इस फॉर्म में निकलता है कि देयर आर अ रेंज ऑफ स्पीशीज व्हिच आर एट द हाई रिस्क ऑफ एलिमिनेशन और एक्सटिंक्शन फ्रॉम द आवर अर्थ। सो देयर इज नीड कि इन ऐसी स्पीशीज को जिनकी एलिमिनेशन और एक्सटिंक्शन के हाई रिस्क पे चली हैं, व्हिच आर कॉल्ड एज endangered species. So there is need to conserve these endangered species and increase their number by adopting different types of strategies. So preserving these population of species which are in danger of decline or extinction, it is called as conservation. बट फॉर द पर्पज ऑफ कंजर्वेशन ये भी इंपॉर्टेंट है कि एटलीस्ट उस स्पीशी के कुछ इतनी पॉपुलेशन साइज जो है वो बच गया हो या सर्वाइव कर गया हो जिसको प्रोटेक्ट करके एक्सटिंक्शन से बचाया जा सके। बट इफ ऑल द पॉपुलेशन साइजेस इन ऑल ओवर द वर्ल्ड इन ऑल टाइप्स ऑफ इकोसिस्टम दे हैव बीन एलिमिनेटेड या एक या दो ही मेंबर सर्वाइव किए, इन दैट केस कंजर्वेशन वोंट बी पॉसिबल। सो इट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट टू रियलाइज कि अगर कोई ऐसी स्पीशी जो कि इंडेंजर्ड हो चुकी है और वो अपनी एलिमिनेशन के रिस्क पे पहुंच चुकी है, तो उसकी जितनी पॉपुलेशन बच गई है डिफरेंट इकोसिस्टम्स में, दे मस्ट बी कंजर्व्ड टू सेव इट फ्रॉम एक्सटिंक्शन। So different strategies जो endangered species के conservation के लिए यूज होती हैं. So one strategy is pristine restoration. In pristine restoration, environmentalists or conservationists they focus to those ecosystems जहाँ से species has been completely eliminated. So in that ecosystem, वो एक specific ecosystem जहाँ से वो species completely eliminate हो गई है, but it is present in other ecosystems. So it can be brought from the other environments, from the other habitats, and it can be introduced and established in that ecosystem which is totally devoid of those species. So the conservationists they have to do attempts to restore the plants and animals in that ecosystem which needs pristine restoration. बट इसके लिए उनको उन पर्टिकुलर एनिमल और प्लांट स्पीशीज को आइडेंटिफाई करना होगा जो कि उस पर्टिकुलर हैबिटेट में इससे पहले मौजूद थी, और these species are capable of establishing, replenishing themselves in that completely damaged habitat. So कंजर्वेशनिस्ट का और एनवायरमेंटलिस्ट का फोकस इस पॉइंट पर होगा कि वो उस जिस अबेंडेंट हैबिटेट है जहाँ पर कोई भी स्पीशी अब सर्वाइव ही नहीं करी, उस स्पीशी में इन प्लांट्स और एनिमल स्पीशीज को इंट्रोड्यूस कराने के बाद एक नॉर्मल फंक्शन को रीस्टार्ट करा सकते हैं। ये वही नॉर्मल फंक्शंस हैं जिनको हमने फूड चेन और फूड वेब्स में स्टडी किया। सो एक फूड चेन और फूड वेब को एस्टैब्लिश करना एक इज नॉट रियली इजी टास्क, इट्स वेरी मच चैलेंजिंग। विद हेल्प ऑफ एग्जांपल वी कैन अंडरस्टैंड दिस। इस पिक्चर में हम एक ऐसे हैबिटेट को देखते हैं व्हिच इज कंप्लीटली डैमेज्ड। सो द यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ विस्कॉन्सिन मेडिसिन के साइंटिस्ट दे स्टार्टेड वर्किंग ऑन दिस हैबिटेट इन November 1935, and in November 1935 they introduced different plant species and different animal species which were suitable for that habitat. और इस habitat को replenish और restore होते हुए from 1935 this photograph has been taken recent years. So it took such a long time for this habitat to be restored. So therefore pristine restoration, it needs a lot of patience, it needs a lot of care of that habitat to protect it from being damaged again. Introduced species can also be threat for the native species present in that habitat. For example, previous lectures में भी we have discussed कि कैसे कोई introduced species once it is introduced in that habitat, उसके लिए वो environment इतना favorable होता है कि वो बहुत तेजी से reproduce करती है, उसका population size increase कर जाता है, and then it start competing with the native species for the available resources. Resultantly, they become a threat for already present fauna and flora in that habitat. So in that cases, these introduced species they should be removed from those habitats. So the habitat even sometimes ये species इतनी dangerous हो सकती है कि only with the one species it can damage the whole habitat just by damaging the one trophic level in the food chain. So in that cases, these habitat restoration activities they should involve the removal of these introduced species as early as possible. But sometimes ऐसे ही होता है कि जब कोई स्पीशी किसी भी हैबिटेट में बाई चांस और बाई ह्यूमन decision it is introduced, it would take over the whole habitat, and then this problem will be realized, and at that time situation will be out of control. The one example is introduction of common carp accidentally in Australian waters, and now that environment is that was so suitable for the common carps, that warm water environment, the aquatic environment, it was so favorable for the common carp that they start reproducing, and then now there is a large size of population present in Australia, and they are consuming those resources for those native species of Australia, for example, the salmonids and the environment. And now they are trying to get rid of these common carp, but it's being almost like out of control. So therefore it is important कि introduce species को जितनी भी जल्दी उस environment से remove किया जा सकता है, it should be done. The next strategy is cleanup and rehabilitation of the pollutants from any environment. Water pollution, air pollution और solid waste pollution we have seen कि हम अपने environment को solid wastes के साथ और polluted water के साथ dump किए चले जा रहे हैं. And resultantly वो habitat it will become unsuitable for animals and plants to survive in that particular habitat. So resultantly वो species जो कि एक polluted environment में मौजूद हैं, they would population size इतना reduce हो जाता है कि they would be at the high risk of extinction and being endangered. So therefore it is important कि उस habitat को as early as possible जो है वहाँ से clean up किया जाए और वहाँ पर species size जो कि बहुत reduce हो गया उनकी reproductive environment जो है उसको favorable करके उनकी rehabilitation के लिए program start किया जाए. So the one example is the Noshwa River in the New England, which has been extremely polluted by the industry which was preparing the dyes. There were the dye plants on the bank of the river. They were dumping their wastewater into that river, but they taken notice of it, and now this water is being cleaned from solid wastes. और उसमें वो सारा water जो कि waste water के form में है, it is properly recycled before adding into that river. So it is important कि वो habitats जो कि over dumping of pollutants की वजह से damage होना शुरू हो गए, उनकी clean up program को फौरी तौर पर start किया जाए. Captive breeding program, that is also the one strategy which is taken for endangered species and the threatened species. It is also called as recovery program. So इस केस में किसी भी habitat में जहाँ पर उस species का size particularly किसी specific environment में या globally बहुत ही reduce हो गया, तो in that case there would be a captive breeding program जहाँ पे एक artificial environment में proper conservationist की supervision में उस species को reproduce किया जाएगा, उनकी artificial breeding होगी, and then their offsprings will be raised under a proper care, and after they are grown up, the population that would be released in the wild environment. So in that case captive breeding program it would be a success story and it might be failed. दोनों cases जो हैं वो इसमें appear हो सकते हैं. Of course के successful story में the animal is capable of living in the natural environment, लेकिन failure cases में ये situation है कि offsprings are being raised in a confined environment जहाँ पे उनको कोई competition face नहीं करना पड़ता. They are protected from the pathogens, food is already provided by their carers, so they are not familiar and they haven't learned the strategy of living in the wild environment. So once they are released in the wild environment, वो वहाँ पर compete करने के काबिल नहीं होते और there is possibility कि ये वहाँ पर potentially reproduce नहीं होगा. So that is the one restraint of captive breeding program, but there is no other choice except doing a captive breeding program if the number or the population size of a species is extremely reduced. For example, in the case of Hawaiian goose, which is practically extinct in the wild, इसमें से 12 birds they were taken in the captivity and then they were artificially bred, और artificially captivity program के बाद the population of 9,000 was released back into the wild environment. But they have competitors in the wild environment, for example the rats, and the rats they start eating eggs of these Hawaiian geese. Resultantly, ये natural environment में reproduce करने के लिए fail हो गए. That is one example of the failure, but there are the success stories as well. For example, the Prairie David's deer population was the native species of the China, and 1865, 18 deer they were taken from the China and then they were artificially bred in the captivity. Or 1981 May 1994 individuals they were released in the wild and they successfully adapted to that new environment and they started reproducing naturally in the wild environment as well. So it is a successful story. National parks की declaration, national parks formation is another strategy to conserve endangered species. किसी ऐसे habitat में जिसमें overhunting की वजह से fragmentation, deforestation की वजह से तो population size बहुत ज़्यादा reduce हो गया और वो अपनी extinction तक पहुँचने के करीब है. उसके केस में that whole natural area it would be declared as a no human activity zone or a national park. So in that case, firstly this area should be suitable for the creation of a reserve and it needs to be identified and it should be delimited by those people which are involved in the national park program. So it needs a lot of surveys, it needs selection of data on those key species which need to be conserved in that particular area of the national park. So in that case, there would be certain policies in which legal issues हैं. For example, the government or that agency which is involved in that national park program, they will have to buy that property and then there should be the legal framework. जिसके result में वहाँ पर human activities they should be completely banned either forever or for some time. Or this program of national park once it is started, it needs a proper care and a continuous care. In that case, once के वहाँ पे legal framework भी हो गया, property की purchase भी हो गई है, but area of that national park is damaged. In that case, that agency they will have to rebuild that area according to the needs of that particular species which they need to which is needed to be conserved. Or ऐसी species which are introduced, which are alien, which are dangerous for those species which are being extinct, for example उनके predators हैं. In that case, उन species को उस national park के area में से remove करना पड़ सकता है because in their presence जो हमारी endangered species है वो reproduce और survive करने के काबिल नहीं होती. So the national parks they need constant management, they need constant supervision. It should be checked कि जिस भी species को हम conserve करके उसका number और population size increase करना चाह रहे हैं, they are actually increasing. And if they are facing any trouble, any problem which is natural or which is artificial or which is done by the human activity, ऐसे सारी problems को address करना that would be very important. So there is a certain restriction national parks, which are conserved areas, and these are the reserved places to flourish the flora and fauna in that habitat. Similar to other countries, there are a few national parks in Pakistan, और उनमें से जो कुछ examples हैं national parks की, one is the Hingol National Park, Ilkar National Park, Kurtal National Park, and then there are a few other national parks as well. And the one common case of endangered species in Pakistan is ibex. Ibex की conservation के लिए Hingol National Park was established. So to see how this Hingol National Park is helping in conservation of ibex, we watch this video.
और मुसलसल निगरानी और तहफ़्फ़ुज़ के सबब हिंगोल पार्क में आइबेक्स की तादाद अब हज़ारों तक पहुंच चुकी है। नर बकरे के सींग तलवार की सूरत लंबे और ऊपर को मुड़े होते हैं। हिंगोल का मौसम और फिजा इसकी परवरिश के लिए इंतहाई मौजूद है। ये अक्सर और बेशतर रेवट की सूरत में चलते हैं। सन 1998 से सन 2004 की तवील खुश्कसाली में इनकी तादाद बहुत कम हो गई थी, मगर इसके बाद इनकी आबादी तेजी से बढ़ने लगी। इंसानी आहट और ऊँट बातें ही तेजी से आंख से ओझल होने लगते हैं। आइबेक्स इंतहाई ताकतवर जिस्म और मजबूत टांगों के सबब बुलंद वाला पहाड़ों पर बहुत आसानी से चढ़ते हैं। इनकी औसत उम्र 12 साल होती है। अमूमन साल में एक बच्चा रहता है। सकले मकान के साथ साथ मड वॉल्केनोज का एक सिलसिला फैला हुआ है, जो अर्जियाती माहिरीन के लिए इल्मी और तहकीकी नुक्ते नजर से बहुत अहमियत रखते हैं।
सो फ्रेंड्स, हमारी वीडियो जो है कंप्लीट हो गई। हम चलते हैं अपनी रीडिंग की तरफ। सो चलते हैं जनाब हम अपनी रीडिंग की तरफ। सो रिपीट से डालो तो देख लेते हैं, अगर होगी तो ठीक है कर लेंगे, नहीं हुई तो फिर ये तो पढ़ते हैं। ड्यू टू ह्यूमन एक्टिविटीज, पोल्यूशन, हैबिटेट डिस्ट्रक्शन, हैबिटेट फ्रेगमेंटेशन, ग्लोबल वार्मिंग एक्सेट्रा, देयर आर a range of species which are at risk of extinction. These species are called endangered species. Efforts to preserve populations and species in danger of decline or extinction are called conservation. In order to conserve an endangered species, its sufficient population must be available in order to reproduce and increase its numbers. If the population of a species is unable to reproduce, then conservation would not be possible. Pristine restoration is one conservation strategy in which the natural habitat of the endangered species is reconstructed so that the natural interspecific interactions are re-established. For this purpose, the conservationists need to identify the animal and plant species which were present in the natural habitat and ecosystem. This will result in reconstruction of the processes that operated in the natural habitat of the endangered species. Removal of introduced or invasive species from the habitat of the endangered species is another conservation strategy. The invasion of introduced species can drastically upset the interspecific interactions going on in an ecosystem. In this situation, removal of the invasive species is required as quickly as possible for habitat restoration and protection of the endangered species. Okay. Habitat cleanup and rehabilitation is a conservation strategy which is employed when the pollution is the reason of decline in the population of animals and plants in a habitat. Chemical pollutants pose a serious threat to animals and plants as the habitat cannot be restored until the pollutant is removed from the environment. When the population of a species drops very low, then captive breeding programs can be helpful in regaining the numbers. It is a recovery program where endangered animals are kept in a protected environment where they can breed and increase their population without facing the risk of hunting, poaching or habitat destruction. Establishment of national parks is also a conservation strategy which essentially means that the habitat of an endangered species is declared on human रिक्वायर सर्वेज टू कलेक्ट डेटा ऑन की स्पीशीज, ठीक है। उसके बाद है द प्रॉपर्टी माइट बी नीडेड टू एक्सप्रोप्रिएटेड एंड अलीगल। अच्छा ठीक, उसके बाद में फ्रेमवर्क एंड लीगल फ्रेमवर्क बी नीडेड टू सेट अप फॉर controlling human activities in the area if a part of the area is being degraded due to the land use. It might need restoration. The alien or introduced species in the area may need exclusion or elimination for protecting the endangered species, ठीक है। Natural parks require constant management of for maintenance of the habitat of the endangered species, ठीक। सही है। उसके बाद हमारे पास in this lesson the students will learn about conservation of endangered species, conservation strategies, सही होगा। इसमें हमारी प्रिपरेशन हो गई है, खैर से पढ़ लेते हैं। जैसे ही ओपन हो जाएगी तो हम पढ़ लेंगे। हाँ जी, तो अभी बड़ी इसको पढ़ लेते हैं हम लोग। Conservation of endangered species, preserving populations and species in danger of decline or extinction. There should be something left to be conserved. सही है। To be conserved. आगे चलते हैं जनाब। In ecosystem pristine restoration in ecosystems where all species have been effectively removed. Conservations might attempt to restore the plants and animals that are the natural inhabitants of the area if these species can be identified, ठीक है। उसके बाद हमारे पास है pristine restoration focuses on reconstructing the processes that operated in the natural habitat, ठीक है। उसके बाद है the University of Wisconsin Madison Arboretum has pioneered restoration ecology. The restoration of the prairie was at an early stage in November 1935. The prairie as it looks today, this picture was taken at approximately the same location as the 1935 photograph, ठीक है। उसके बाद removing introduced species. Sometimes a habitat has been destroyed by a single introduced species. In such a case, habitat restoration involves removing the introduced species. It is important to act quickly if an introduced species is to be removed. Cleanup and rehabilitation. Habitats that are seriously degraded by chemical pollution. They cannot be restored until the pollution is cleaned up. Example is Nashua River in New England, ठीक है, इंग्लैंड, सही है। उसके बाद में क्लीन अप आफ्टर बीइंग हैवीली पोल्यूटेड बाय डाई प्लांट्स। Captive breeding programs, recovery programs, particularly focused on one or a few species, sometimes involve direct intervention in natural populations to avoid an immediate threat of extinction. It might be successful or failed effort, ठीक है। Captive breeding programs. The Hawaiian goose was practically extinct in the wild 12 birds were taken into captivity. A population of 9,000 was released back into the wild. The cats eat the eggs and the nestlings of the geese. Captive breeding program. Pierre David's deer was a native species of China in 1865. In 1865, 18 were taken into zoological collections. Meanwhile, it became extinct in the wild by 1981. There were
which are coming in these genes, and it is happening as a result of evolution that is responsible for variations and responsible for different varieties, appearance of new species, and enhancing the biodiversity in that environment. So evolution is such an old subject, और बहुत ही कदीम ज़माने से इस subject के ऊपर एक discussion होती रही है, और इसका एक subject एक अपना evolution जो है वो continue है. So these different eras of the history of this subject, it can be divided into 5 different stages or 5 different time phases. One is classical, medieval, pre-Darwinian period, and then Darwinian period or Darwinian revolution, and then there is the modern synthesis. So we'll study these different phases to understand this subject gradually. So the first phase of history of evolution, that was classical, and it was that time period जब scientists or philosophers they used to believe more in their thoughts and wisdom as compared to experiments. और mostly वो time period है जिसमें कि Greek और Roman philosophers जो हैं बहुत ज़्यादा prominently active नजर आते हैं. So during that time period, it was considered that all living things are related to each other. और ये समझा जाता था कि ये एक type of organism it could descend from the other type of organism. So there was no concept of species, there was no concept of genes or genotype or the transfer of characteristics. It was considered कि कोई भी ऐसा organism जो कि different characteristics रखता है ये किसी भी और different organism से evolve हो सकता है. So that was the time period which was mostly dominated by Lucretius. He was the one philosopher. So that classical time period was followed by the medieval time period. And during that period, again, अभी तक experiment जो है वो science की world में enter नहीं हो सका. Still, the philosophers they are thinking and discussing about the different phenomena, and then they brought a theory of fixed natural possibilities. Then they believed कि वो सारी organisms, वो सारे plants और अपने features जो कि इस वक्त मौजूद हैं, ये हमेशा से जब से अर्थ की formation हुई है, उस दिन से लेकर अब तक इनमें कोई भी तब्दीली नहीं है, and they are totally fixed. So these life forms were considered fixed, but Aristotle he added a little bit modification in that theory of fixation, and he said that new type of living things there is possibility that they come to be. So that was the medieval period, which was followed by pre-Darwinian period. And the pre-Darwinian period, here now evolutionists or scientists they start looking for different evidences which are more scientific, which are more logical, and then they started introducing and performing different experiments as well. So the pre-Darwinian period it began in 17th century. And it explained कि वो सारे natural phenomena जो कि हमारे environment में हो रहे हैं, they are actually controlled by different physical laws. So now the thought of a scientist is more logical. John Ray he introduced the term species, which is the basic term in study of evolution. And then in 1735, Linnaeus was a very prominent taxonomist, and he explicitly recognized the hierarchical nature of different species. So he recognized that there is a group of organisms which is comparatively simple, and then there is another group which is more complex, and then more complex. So he understood that hierarchy, and he introduced the 5 kingdom system. And we are very much familiar with the Linnaeus classification of 5 kingdom system, which include the kingdom Monera, Protista, Plantae, Animalia, and these are that is the beginning of the modern taxonomy. During this period, Buffon was another evolutionist who suggested that species could degenerate into different organisms. So he primitively gave that concept of divergent evolution. From a common ancestry, there could be occurrence of different types of species which have dissimilarities from each other. And at the same time, there was another evolutionist, Erasmus Darwin, and he proposed that all the warm-blooded animals they could have descended from a single microorganism. So he proposed an initial or primitive concept of organic evolution. इसी pre-Darwinian time period में सबसे पहली evolutionary scheme that was proposed by John Baptist Lamarck. So he proposed the first theory of evolution, जिसे कि हम Lamarckism कहते हैं, या उसको हम theory of or inheritance of acquired characters का भी नाम दिया जाता है. So he proposed कि this is the theory of changes and mutations which are acquired during the life. It can be transferred to the offsprings. But this theory it faced a lot of resistance. And then different scientists जो कि Lamarck के ही follower थे, they did certain experiments and they proved that Lamarckism, this theory of acquired characters, it is not really appreciable or it doesn't have a solid background, so it was rejected later on. Darwinian time period or Darwinian revolution, that was the most remarkable time period in the history of evolution. Malthus was a prominent figure during this period, 1798, and he proposed that population growth creates a struggle for resources. So if the population size is growing, it is increasing, the members of that population are competing for available resources. And this theory of Malthus is motivated Darwin to propose his groundbreaking theory of natural selection in 1859. So we'll study these two theories in future modules. Darwin's theory that was followed and it was further refined and explained by the follower evolutionists. For example, the also played an important role, and he performed a series of experiments, and he proved that the germ cells are responsible for transfer of characters from parents to offsprings. And he demonstrated that only the germ line is responsible for inheritance. De Vries was another scientist who proposed that heritable material, it is present in the nucleus and it can be transferred to the cytoplasm. So at that time DNA was not identified, but De Vries proposed a clue, or he proposed a theory which led towards discovery of DNA in future. Modern synthesis, it started after the Darwin period, because now science has developed a lot. There were modern technologies, there were the modern machines and equipment, and there were more awareness about the scientific concepts. So this era is known as the modern synthesis, and we are in this era as well. So it is connected natural selection and the population genetics and the Mendelian genetics, and they made the laws and the theories which are the basis of evolution nowadays. And during that time, Watson and Crick, they also proposed their model of DNA in 1953, which was a breakthrough in this history, because DNA is that material which is responsible for bringing the changes, which is responsible for transferring characters from parents to the next generation. This study of evolution is based on different types of evidences, and these evidences are of 4 different categories: biogeography, paleontology, comparative anatomy, and molecular biology. We will study these evidences one by one.
सो हमारी वीडियो हो गई है कंप्लीट, हम चलते हैं आगे। सो हम रीडिंग कर लेते हैं। एवोल्यूशन इज द ब्रांच ऑफ बायोलॉजी व्हिच इज द स्टडी ऑफ चेंज इन द हेरिटेबल कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स of biological populations over successive generations. These characteristics are the expressions of genes which are passed on from parents to offspring during reproduction. Variations come from evolution and cause biodiversity. The history of evolution can be divided into 5 stages: classical, medieval, pre-Darwinian, Darwinian, revolution, and modern synthesis. In the classical era, it was believed that all living things were related and that they had changed over time. ठीक है, one type of organism could descend from another type. ठीक है, उसके बाद Lucretius is one of the dominant philosophers of the classical era. In medieval period, the concepts evolved from the classical ideas, and it was believed that life forms were fixed. This concept is called fixed natural possibilities and stages that all the life forms were fixed since the beginning of the time and would remain the same till the end. Aristotle added the concept that new types of living things could come to be. ठीक है, उसके बाद है pre-Darwinian period began in 17th century when philosophers and scientists began to explain natural phenomena in terms of physical laws. John Ray introduced the term species in 1735. Linnaeus explicitly recognized the hierarchical nature of species relationships and introduced the 5 kingdom classification system. Buffon suggested that species could degenerate into different organisms. Erasmus Darwin proposed that all warm-blooded animals could have descended from a single microorganism. In 1809, Jean Baptiste Lamarck presented very first evolutionary scheme. He proposed the theory of changes or mutations over the time. It was a break from the concept of fixed creation, but his theory faced strong resistance. ठीक है, उसके बाद है Darwinian revolution is the next era in which ideas were applied to humans by Huxley using paleontology and comparative anatomy. Gregor Mendel proposed laws of genetics. Weismann, for the first time, made the important distinction between germ cells and somatic cells. He demonstrated that heredity passes through the germ line only. ठीक है. D. Varies proposed that heritable material is in the nucleus and transferred to cytoplasm of a cell. The modern synthesis is the current age of evolution. It connects natural selection and population genetics based on Mendelian inheritance into a unified theory that applied generally to any branch of biology. Watson and Crick presented the structure of DNA. The study of evolution requires evidences based on biogeography, paleontology, comparative anatomy and molecular biology. ठीक है. उसके बाद in this lesson we will learn about evolution, eras of evolution. Okay, done. So चलते हैं आगे. पोस्ट असेसमेंट ले लेते हैं और ठीक है फिर यहाँ पर हम लोग पोस्ट असेसमेंट ले लेते हैं. इस वीडियो में हमारे दूसरा टॉपिक कंप्लीट होने वाला है. सही है. ब्लीचिंग इज परफॉर्म्ड फॉर